Good morning and happy Monday to you. My name is LaShonda Brown and welcome to Bootstrap Biz Advice Live, where each Monday at 10, I go live on YouTube and today on LinkedIn to share practical biz advice to help you to work less and live more. When you know how to do less manually, you can live a more fulfilling life, and this channel will help you do exactly that. To get more mindful marketing and tech tips delivered straight to your inbox, head to lashondabrown.com/join the club. And this week, I will be co-hosting our monthly workshop with Justin Shields on Thursday at 1 p.m. So here is a quick ad to share what you will learn. The only constant right now seems to be change. If you're interested in learning how to reset your life, join me and Justin Shields on September 12th for the Designed for Resilience workshop. In this workshop, Justin shares about the life-changing year that led to his first reset and the 7 steps he took to reconnect with his passion, purpose, and vision. You'll walk away from this session with useful life hacks for increased productivity, thoughtful self-care, and a greater sense of emotional intelligence. Tickets to this workshop and replay are included for Bootstrap creators and Star Student members. If you are not a member and would still like to attend, you can visit lashondabrown.com/workshops to purchase your $10 ticket today. I'll see you on September 12th at 1 p.m. for the Designed for Resilience workshop. So today I have my dear friend Hannah with me to talk about her upcoming book, The Unplugged Hours. And I want to show you a little visual aid before I bring her up on the stage. So these are Hannah's first 3 books. And I remember meeting her shortly after this bad boy, Come Matter Here. Well, she and I decided that we would go and speak at a camp in Canada where there was no cell phone reception, and we were gone for a week. We could have died or not turned back up, but instead we became really fast friends. And after our time in the woods, she rolled out Fighting Forward. I cannot believe that after these 3 bad boys, she reached out to me and asked if I would be willing to write an endorsement for this. So I just want to say before she comes up to the stage that sometimes you pick up books in the bookstore and you say, man, here's a girl who's writing about Happy Mail. Like, we could probably have something in common one day. And little do you know, time may go past where that book that inspired you leads to a beautiful friendship with someone who lives on the East Coast with you and loves the Lord and loves to unplug. So I'm so excited to have her here today. I have some questions prepared. I encourage you to engage in the comments and ask questions as well. We will tackle your questions at the end, but I cannot tell you how excited I am to have my dear friend Hannah with me. So I'm going to play the stinger and bring her up on the stage.
Hello.
Hello, my dear. How are you?
I'm good. I've just been like vibing out to all the music. Like, I'm loving it.
You know, I like to have my own little show over here. Let's be honest.
I love it. I love it. It's only pure excellence from you.
Thank you, my friend. Pure extra is what I like to call. So I feel like when I look at the stack of your books, I feel like they kind of serve as like a little time capsule as to what you had happening in your life at the time that you're writing it. So I want to start with this question. What was happening in your life that led to you writing the Unplugged Hours?
So I think like a lot of people, what was going on was COVID. And it was in 2021 that I reached that point where I felt like, okay, like we have been in this pandemic for a hot minute. I am tired. I am burnt out. I feel exhausted most of the time, but it wasn't like this, like, it wasn't even like a pandemic exhausted or like a new mom exhausted. It was just simply like I felt like the constant connectivity was so draining and I never knew how to turn off or unplug at that time in my life. And so it was inspired largely by my birthday that year. I remember sitting in my quiet time, and I am someone who chronically treats my birthday like a second new year. And I was like dreaming up what I wanted to do with this year ahead. And as I was sitting there in the quiet moment, I just felt this strong nudge inside of me to just turn off my phone. And I knew in that moment, it wasn't like turn off your phone once and reap all the benefits. It was like this call to turn off my phone again and again and again and see what was waiting for me there. And I know better than to like dismiss a nudge. So I leaned in and created a challenge for myself that ended up being 1,000 unplugged hours in a year. And it was the most transformative year that I think I've ever had in my life. And a few months on the other side of it, but still cultivating that rhythm of unplugging, was when I realized, like, oh, there is a book here that does need to be written.
So I was on, the early train when you decided to make that little worksheet in Canva
Yep,
and say,
yep.
"Hey, if y'all want to do this, you can too." And I was like, "You know what? I I could tell that I was reaching that point where
Mm-hmm.
perhaps I needed to do the same thing." And I remember sitting down with my husband for dinner one night, 'cause we have date night every Friday night, and I noticed that I was giving my phone more attention than him.
Mm-hmm.
And he made a comment and he was like, "I feel like what's happening on your phone is more important than this date."
Wow.
And I was like, "Okay." So I was justifying it in my head as like, "Oh, well, my job is online, it's for work,
Yep.
But at the end of the day, I think that we justify bad behavior to the point where we can never improve.
Mm.
And when I saw that little handout, it just like spoke to my little like crafty brain that I was like, "Okay, I'm gonna get a gel pen for every day of the week and I'm gonna journal while I'm bubbling." And girl, I took it to a whole nother level. But when I walked away after that 1,000 hours, I was like, wow,
Mm.
I had started to reach out to friends for in-person things because it made it easier for me to get my hours.
Right, right, yep.
And what started as like a little hack to be able to bubble in the bubbles turned into a life of more presence.
Mm.
And I was like, "Okay, girl, you on to something. You on to something." And so when I saw the subtitle of the book, I was like, "Dang it, Hannah, here you go again." What does cultivating a life of presence in a digitally connected world mean? Because that's what you got underneath the unplugged hours on the cover.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think the most important thing to say from the jump, and one of the reasons that I had asked you to endorse the book, one, because I love you, two, because you had done the unplugged hours, but three, because nowhere in this book are you going to hear me say, I think we should throw out tech, or I think that we should be done with social media. I think that a lot of the conversation that we're having right now about our phones is very much this all or nothing approach. And I personally think that a balance can be struck, a balance between being digitally connected and also cultivating a life of presence. And I even think that there's crossover between the two. But for me personally, it's interesting because I started filling in the bubbles as well. And I started to see this shift and like this reframing in my mind of like, oh no, like I'm not like putting my phone away and digitally connecting to take something away from my life. By practicing these unplugged hours, I'm adding something to my life. My life is gaining something from this. And so that's what I think I mean when I say like cultivating a life of presence, is like there is a capability to do that without going off the grid, without throwing out your phone or getting a dumb phone. But you have to determine, what does that mean to me? What does it look like to cultivate presence for me? And where do I want that presence to carry through? Is that with my family? Is that during date night? Is that doing a bedtime with my kid? Is that quiet time in the morning? And instead of like trying to hack your whole life, find these pockets where you really want to cultivate presence, which means your attention is fully there, you are fully in the moment, and start to cultivate those moments. And you are going to start to see life is going to feel more joyful and light. Time is going to start to expand itself. I feel like before I was unplugging, I was always saying, I don't have enough time. I never have enough time. When in actuality, I did have enough time. I just needed to learn to allocate it better. And so I think cultivating presence is going to be different for all of us. It's going to mean different things, but I really think it comes down to where we're placing our attention.
So since I like to be a little rule follower, I was
Yeah.
like, okay, what what is technically unplugged? Like what counts, because we all like to make sure we're getting it right before we commit to a challenge, whether it's
Mhm.
fitness related or lifestyle related. And so I just thought it was very interesting that at the beginning of the book you talked about like defining what unplug means to you. So
Yeah.
why do you think that's important for people to do?
Because I think, okay, so I think that I really do believe that unplugging is different for everyone. Like I set a standard for myself, but for somebody else, unplugging might look a little bit different. And the reason I wanted to say that up front is because I think, like, especially with the way that our world operates, like people are like, if I'm going to do a challenge or whatever, like I'm going to do, like, I'm sure you've heard of like the 75 hard. And it's like this, like, list of like all of these things that you have to do in order to complete the 75 hard. And if you mess up any of those, you go back to zero and you have to start again. And I think there can be times and places for those kinds of challenges. But I also think if we can set parameters and boundaries for ourselves and do our best to honor those, and if we fail in one day, have the ability to show up the next day, we're going to see a lot more progress and the whole experience is going to be a lot more redemptive. And so for me, unplugged really means like pretty much tech free, screen free at least. I would consider it unplugged if I didn't have my phone, if I wasn't like binge watching a series on Netflix or whatever I might do to check out. If I'm not scrolling, if the phone is not in sight, that would generally be unplugged to me. But there are little caveats. So, like me and my husband, like we have a tradition on Friday nights where we do what's called Pizza Friday, and we'll pick a movie and we'll sit and we'll watch a movie together and we'll eat pizza. And it's such a great tradition, but my phone's not present, and I would consider that to be unplugged, even though we're watching a film, because we are intentionally placing our attention on that activity as opposed to we'll just have this playing in the background and we'll be on our phones, or we'll just do this because we don't feel like there's anything else to do. And so that's where I say, like, pick what works for you, because for one person, it might be like, hey, I do a workout every day on my phone, but I'm not scrolling from app to app. So I feel like that's unplugged. And I'm like, great, write that down for your own rules and parameters. It might be you are listening to a long form podcast, and that is something that you feel like you're able to absorb information in a really healthy way. I would say then go ahead and count that. That's what I mean by like you have to define what unplugged means for you. And going back to that idea that I think it comes down to where you're placing your attention, and if your attention is going towards other things or towards a single focus task.
Well, and I would say too, in my case, like I do use my phone a lot, like for utility purposes. Like I use
Mhm.
my phone to play Spotify, or I use my phone to
Yep.
play Audible, or my phone to work out, cast it to the TV. And so, I think the same thing. What I would try to challenge myself to do is like, if you're going to use your cell phone to help you do things that are unplugged, just flip it over. So for
Yep.
me, it was, am I looking at the screen? If I'm not looking at the screen, then it would count, even if I'm actively playing music or whatever. And so I think,
Totally. Yep.
yeah, giving yourself that bandwidth to do something different than just saying screen free, I think it's really important. So I remember sliding into your DMs after I did the 1,000 challenge the first
You did
time.
it so fast.
I was so fast. Because, I told you, woman on a mission. I even like kept the
Yeah.
bubble somewhere and I got water and I was so mad, but I did use it for a photo shoot if you need some pics. But
Okay.
anyway, beside the point, I would love to talk about what actually happened immediately after that 1,000 hours. Because I'm sure you had like some ideas of what it would do. But
Mm.
as soon as you finished that last hour, like what happened at that point?
Okay, well, it's interesting because honestly, I think that a lot of the transformation was taking place within the hours. That by the time that I hit the 1,000 hour, It's not that I didn't care, but I was a different person than the person that set out to unplug for 1,000 hours. Like, to know me and to know me back then would be like, of course, that's what she's going to do. She's going to set a challenge. She's going to, like, she's going to have all these metrics. Like, I've never met a challenge that I didn't love. But what I realized, even in the unplugging, was like, oh, this is one of the ways in which I define my value and my worth, is by completing challenges, is by being overachiever, by being a perfectionist. And so I remember having this moment when I was like at the 800-hour mark where I realized, I was like, okay, I'm on track to hit my goal. But like, what if I didn't? Like, what if I didn't hit the goal? Would all of the hours that I have been unplugged, reclaiming my time, would that still matter to me? And that was a paradigm shift for me, because I think I'm so much, or I used to be so much of an all or nothing person, that I'd be like, no, you have to hit the goal and you have to hit it meticulously. When in actuality, there's so much more nuance. Like Paula Marie, like, was saying, there's like nuance to this. And so I, throughout the 1,000 hours, saw so many life-giving shifts and changes. I became more present. I became more happy. I became more fulfilled, more content. I became a more present mom. But it's funny, because I would say that as I've continued to cultivate the rhythm of unplugging, a lot of the bigger transformations happened post 1,000 hours. It's almost like the 1,000 hours was the foundation that was set for like a lot of other bigger things to come to the forefront and change and shift inside of me.
So I'm always curious when I see authors quoting other people in their books. I'm like, ooh, I wonder what made them pick that one. So there was a quote in the chapter called Rabbi. All of
Hmm.
humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone. What made you choose that particular quote?
I know that that's a quote that I think has been referenced a lot. Like, it's a very common quote that comes up a lot. What was compelling to me was the fact that, okay, Blaise Pascal wrote this in 1654. Like, that was a long time ago. And I think it is a reminder to me that, like, oh, this isn't just we got so digitally connected and so that's the problem. Like, it's so much more. For almost all of time, we have struggled to sit alone with ourselves, to sit quietly with our thoughts, to be curious to see what is there and what is inside of us. That's not just now we have Netflix problem, or now we have Instagram problem. Yes, do I think that there are more barriers that keep us from sitting alone with ourselves, but in reading that quote, it's like, okay, wow, like, that wasn't even written in the 1980s. That was written hundreds of years ago. And this has been like, it's rooted in us. It's deep in us that, like, we don't want to be alone. And yet, what's really crazy is now I sit with myself all the time. I sit with my thoughts all the time. It is one of the best parts of the day to get alone with a notebook and just like listen, or just think, or just do nothing. And me a few years ago would have never, no way. I did not want to be alone in my own thoughts and minds. But now I'm like, wow, like, it is this spacious, vibrant place within me that I genuinely enjoy cultivating.
So I think what you just said is so interesting considering how you decided to end your book. Because girl, when I
Mm.
tell you I was all up in this look, I was so nervous to write that endorsement, girl. I was highlighting everything. I was like, I don't even know. Funny fact, I struggled to figure out what I wanted to say. And I was sitting on campus at Liberty about to teach a
Mm.
workshop on Canva. And like it was just such a surreal experience because I'm like, I'm at the place where I became an adult. But this time, I'm still wearing the backpack. I'm still on campus, but this time I'm at the front of the room and not at the desk.
Mm.
And I'm like, okay, as this version of myself, why is this book necessary? What would I say to the
Mm.
person at the desk, you know? And it was so easy to write at that point. And so I just remember looking at the end of the book saying, okay, Hannah has poured her heart and soul into this book.
Yeah.
She could have said anything to end this book, but you chose to say a 3 word phrase 3 times. And I won't even get into the numbers part because that's a whole nother side of my brain. But why did you choose to say take your time as the way you ended your book?
Yeah, it's funny because when you write the book, like you submit an outline and then you do your best to stick to that outline when you're writing. But anybody that knows that has gone through the creative process of a creative project or anything where the creative forces are around you, what you start with is never what you end with. And these ideas come in the last moment. And I that was not originally the final chapter of the book, and anybody that reads the book will, I think, see a progression of almost like this softness comes. That by the end of the book, there's like a lot of this softness and a lot of this grace that I think happened while I was writing the book. But yeah, those 3 words, take your time, um, they have a dual meaning to them. And so in one way, it's this idea like take your time, like in the way that we say it to one another of just like, hey, like take your time, like enjoy the ride, slow down, go at the pace you need to go at. I know that everybody is telling you to move faster. I know that everybody is telling you you have to like push the pedal, but like take your time, enjoy the back roads. But the dual meaning of that is more of like a call to action, more like a hey, we need to get scrappy and we need to take our time back. Like, take your time back because there are things and there are forces and there are distractions that are actively taking your time and taking away the hobbies you want to cultivate, the projects you want to execute, the creations that you want to create. And so, it really is this moment of like kind of a wake up call of like you've been given time, but you need to take it, you need to allocate it, you need to send it in the direction that you want it to go. And that was one of the things that like you'll see throughout the book is like I didn't want to write a how-to book. I didn't want to say here's the 5 steps you need for unplugging. I think that it's pretty straightforward. You're either going to turn off your phone or not. But I wanted to share the revelations and the stories and the things that I learned along the way. And that was a pretty vital one. That felt like the most important one. Is like in a world where we're constantly saying we don't have enough time, can we take our time and can we put it towards the things that actually matter to us?
It was such a beautiful answer. I was just nosy, girl. I was like, it's a great ending. I wonder what made her choose that. So there was one more thing that I saw that I really want to know. Why did you choose to dedicate this book to your
Hmm.
mom?
Yeah, if you meet my mom, she is literally like the most present person in the world. And she does have a phone now though, because we took a long time trying to get her, trying to get her to get a phone, and she did not want a phone. She did not want a cell phone. She was like, "People have not needed to find me for the last 60 years. Why do we need to start now?" But she is somebody who is just when you're with her, she's with you. She's thoughtful. She remembers things. She lights up a room. She like kids love her, adults love her. Like she's just always been this resilient example of presence to me. And that's why I think if you read any of my books, you will see this common thread of presence throughout, because I think it is the most important message that I will ever impart to my readers. And so it's funny that it took 4 books to dedicate this book to my mom, but I think it was perfect. Like it was the perfect book to dedicate to her because she is the one who has taught me about presence. And I always say, like, if I could just be like an ounce of the amount of presence that she brings into the world, like that would be good. That would be enough. But I think I didn't even realize, like, growing up, like, the example of presence that my mom has set for me is one that a lot of other people have never experienced, and one that I think generations coming up may never experience. And so it felt more urgent to be like, no, this is a way to live. This is a lifestyle to cultivate, a lifestyle of presence. And I don't know anybody who does that better than my mom.
Well, I always love the antics and adventures with your mom because I just feel like she brings out a side of you, a playfulness that is just
Mhm.
hysterical to see. Like, I don't remember why you did it, but I remember you like hiding little babies in the house
Yeah.
when you visited. And I was like, I don't know why I'm so invested in this, but this is like the most hysterical
Baby.
thing I've ever seen. And I mean, I just think that, when I see the way you even capture her in your stories, it really does speak to me to say, like, there's a different version of life that we could be living. Like, we could just
Mm.
choose to
Yeah.
just not have it. We could choose to just not do it because she seems so unbothered. And I love that for her. You know what I mean? Like, it just
Yeah.
seems like she has no regrets. Like, she's not missing out. And,
Well,
I just think that's beautiful. And it makes sense why you chose to feature her in this book particularly.
and I think to that point, like there's a scene, I think it's closer to the end of the book where it's like throughout the unplugging, I was having these like just these memories of my mom and like we'd be going places and it would always take forever. Like she was always stopping and starting and taking a picture over here and doing something over here, enjoying them over here. And I look back and I think, oh my gosh, I spent so much time, I think, trying to change her, trying to get her to move faster, trying to get her to like keep up with the culture and where it was going. And now I can look at it and be like, no, she knew exactly what was going on, but she was choosing to make her choices. She was choosing the way in which she wanted to be available and present in her life. And I'm like, that had never ever dawned on me, that I could choose to slow down the pace, that I could choose to take the back roads over the highway, that I could choose this is the pace at which I want to live and operate my life, and I will have no apologies for that. It's really empowering. I just never saw it as empowering growing up.
Well, and I would say the same thing, even about like where you live. A lot of people who decide they want to be full time content creators think that they need to live in New York or LA or Atlanta to like
Mhm.
make sure that they're surrounded by other creators. And I have just found that living in the mountains, first of all,
Mm.
there's actually a ton of content creators here, which is so random. But at the same time, being able to focus on creating and then hardcore unplug. I'm like, the phone is gone. We're
Yeah.
out in the woods. I'm by somebody's creek or stream. It has helped me so much to have that balance of like, okay, when I'm actively creating, I am fully invested and fully plugged in. But if I don't chase that with
Mm.
nature and time with people and being where my feet are, I will literally go crazy from that constant connectivity. And
Yeah.
so I would encourage people, especially if you are trying to do content marketing for your business or be a content creator, it's almost a necessity, I think, to unplug. I think it's a part of how you allow your brain to just recover. I mean, it's like somebody was talking about it the other day. They were like, you know how many iPhone users never fully turn that phone off? They will put it to sleep, but
Yeah.
until it breaks, they will never turn it off because it takes a couple seconds to boot up. And I just thought about that and I'm like, you know what? Our brains are like that. Like, we need to turn it off. Like, we need to sleep, we
Yeah.
need to rest. And so
Yeah.
it's like if we keep going, 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 and we're not finding time to turn off, eventually it's just going to break. It's just going to break down.
Mm.
So I think this book in particular, now all of them are good. Don't get me wrong. And I should not play favorites. But I think at this point, bringing back slowness,
Mm.
strategically unplugging, there is something so special about that at this time. I
Mhm.
think people need that more than ever. And I think also that idea of not just taking away, but adding to your life, being more
Yeah.
present with the people around you and slowing down enough just to have conversations. Huge, huge deal. And I mean, there's so much I underlined in this and so much I would encourage people to like, even as you read the book, go slow because it's just so jam packed. But we were talking about this before we went live about just the importance of pre-ordering. And so I know that
Mhm.
sometimes people are like, oh, I'll wait till I see it in the stores. But why do you think that pre-ordering is important for authors?
Yeah, I think we always say pre-orders are the best gift that you can give to an author because those pre-orders really set the tone for like the next 90 days to come. It allows bookstores to know, okay, this is a book that we need to have and have copies of and have it in stock and ready to go. It allows bigger companies like Amazon to know, okay, we have to be ready, like, and ready to restock at any moment. Those pre-orders, those count towards that first week of sales, which is basically going to set the trajectory of the book. Now, obviously, the book can do whatever it wants. It can, in the ninth week, decide to just have a boost and a burn boost. And we don't really get to determine that because it could be a word of mouth thing. But it always does help because it allows people in the different companies that are stocking those books to know, okay, this is a book that we need to look out for because people are going to be ordering it. Because as much as we say pre-order, there is going to be a large amount of the population that will not buy the book until they can get the book. And we want to make sure in that case that the book is ready for you to be able to get your hands on.
So you guys can go to hannahbrencher.com to pre-order your copy. You can look it up on whatever book site you want. I think it's literally everywhere at this point. I know I saw the different logos on your website. So I would encourage you all, if you're going to get the book, just pre-order it. It's going to really help the success of this book. And I do think that more people need to be aware of it and need to see it. So that is one of the reasons why I like slid into Hannah's DMs and I was like, girl, you got to come on a channel. We got to talk about it. Because I do think that this book is one that online entrepreneurs especially need on their bookshelf. So I will say this. I did not want to read your resume to start this conversation because I feel like this book is so much more about who you are and not what you
Mm,
do.
yeah.
But do you want to tell the people what you do before we land the plane?
I don't know. What do you want me to say to them? I think honestly though, like here,
Well,
okay,
you're a
here.
TED speaker. There's that.
I'm a
TED
TED
happens.
speaker, I'm an author, I wear a lot of hats. Um, but it's funny because like, yeah, we always start the conversations with what do you do and what are the markings of success? And what I think is like really great, and especially how it ties to this book, is that I feel like this book gets to the core of who I actually am. Like, it's not about accolades of success. It's not about a TED Talk, even though the TED Talk was beautiful, but it's more so like at my heart of heart, if you ask me, like, what do I do? I would like to say, like, I write words that make people feel less alone, and I write words that make people feel like they can keep going. And the beautiful thing about a book is that you literally get to do that for like a whole 200 pages. Like, that is the greatest honor in the world to me. And so I think that is really like, I love coming into spaces where I can really lean on who I am rather than what I do. And this has been one of those spaces.
Well, I'm glad because that was the goal. I mean, I've been on so many different podcast interviews and, bless them, but the format's the same and you feel like you're saying the same old things over
Yeah.
and over. And I just feel like at this point, I would rather share what makes me tick than what's in my
Mm,
LinkedIn resume. You know,
totally.
it's
Yes.
there if you want to read it, girl. I got a website. You can go to that about page if you really
Yeah.
want to. But I feel like, with the limited time that we have on this earth, I would much rather fill conversations with meaningful nuggets of wisdom than just humble brags. So that was
Amen.
the goal, girl. That was the goal. So I hope you all really enjoyed this. I think I saw Mary said that she loved this conversation. She said that her alone time is so important to her, and taking social media off her phone. I will tell you, and not everybody can do this, but literally, I have a whole separate phone for social media now. Like, I do
Yep.
not have my social media apps on my main phone, and it's so annoying to use that phone for social media that I just don't use it very often. And that's the point. So if you can do it that way, great. If you download the apps and delete them, reinstall them, great. whatever works for you. But I do think that there are so many people that need to feel seen and
Mm.
heard.
Mhm.
And the only way that we can actually do that is if we're looking up and not looking down at our phones.
Yeah.
So Paula had a quick question. She said, by presenting myself, I've learned that when I work on my computer, I hold my breath. Breaking up my working time with nature time is so important to me. Did you
Mm.
notice physical changes too? Yeah, that's so interesting. Yeah, I like God knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
reason why being outside is so good for you. Hannah, what do you do for your outside time?
Well, we don't have mountains and streams over here. But like I get, it's funny because like I think this was a rhythm I started cultivating in the unplugged hours where it's like I will do a few tasks like on my computer in my office, and then I will break it up with going for a walk around the block, which to get from like point A to point B around the block, it's about a 10-minute walk, which is a great break. That researchers say you can look at your phone during that time, which I used to be guilty of doing, or what's way more beneficial for your focus is to look at a place that has a horizon. And so it's being mindful of like, okay, I'm gonna be in nature, I'm gonna walk around the block. So yeah, we get to the mountains a lot, we do a lot of hiking and all of that, but just to go to that question too, I think that's what you will notice is like your body will respond to this. It's funny because now, even though it's not efficient at all, I do a lot of my work and my writing on these yellow notepads that are literally strewn everywhere in my house. And it's crazy because it's like, yeah, to type it on my computer would be a lot more efficient. But like this has actually unlocked a different kind of creativity in me, and the creativity and the creation process comes much easier. But the other thing that I'll say about physical was that one of the things that I started incorporating into my unplugged hours was a weekly Sabbath. And so on Fridays, come sundown, I am powering down and not rebooting until Saturday at sundown, which a lot of times ends up being Sunday morning. But what's crazy about it is that the bigger thing for me is like powering down from work, not being on my email, not actively doing work. But come Friday afternoon, without fail now, after cultivating this rhythm for like the last 2 or so years, my whole body will sense it physically that it's time to power down and it's time to shut off and it's time to take a break. And that's like one of the coolest physical changes of like, oh, even if I don't feel like it, my body knows and my body is responding to that Sabbath break.
No, I can definitely resonate with that because what I have started doing is, 4 days on, 3 days off. And I even tried it last week to be cute because of Labor Day. I was like, oh, I'll work on Friday. Girl, my body was like, I know it's Friday.
Yeah,
I'm gonna need
yeah,
you to calm
yeah.
down. Like it was
Yep.
crazy. Like I could definitely feel it. I'm like, I have brain fog. Like everything's going so slow. Like what's happening? And I'm like, yeah, it once you set that rhythm, like your body keeps score. It knows. And so
Yep.
you really have to be diligent with sticking with those rhythms to develop that discipline in your life. So before I let you go, I do want to give this a shout out. So you are actually the reason that I ended up on Groove because you shared about it in your stories. And I was like, ooh, beta. I love
Yeah.
testing apps. So you
Yes.
shared about another app recently, and I don't know if it's rolling out of beta or what, but it was about
Mhm.
like parents and their phone. Do you remember the name of that before I let you
Oh,
go?
RO.
Yes, yes. Can you share about that?
Yeah. Okay. So yes, I have followed them since beta testing of their box. They have this box, it's called the RO box, and you can literally put your phone into the box and it will snap into whatever is going on in the background of the app and it will start to track your unplugged time. It is such a cool experience, especially because I think it's a very family centric company. And so, like, the example of like even giving your phone to your kid to go and put in the box, and that signals to them of like, okay, mom is powering down, dad is powering down, it's time to be present. But what's really cool is that they have rolled out an app where you don't necessarily need to buy the box in order to utilize the app. And I mean, it is such a cool app, because all you have to do is press like open up the app, and then you literally flip your phone upside down, and it will start to track your unplugged time, which I think is particularly helpful because, like, Lashonda, we're like perfectionists. We want to be like, oh, okay, well, that was only 49 minutes, so it doesn't count towards the full hour, you know?
Girl, do you
Like,
know how many times I was like, ah, it was close to an hour. Like,
right?
it's
Or
just
I
funny
would
that you
be
said
like,
that.
it was an unplugged hour. I just didn't really feel that present. So I'm not going to mark it. And what's great about this is like, you don't have to do any of that. It will just say, like, hey, school drop off took 39 minutes and you were off your phone for that 39 minutes. We're going to add it to the unplugged hours. And that to me
That's
is
so
like
good.
really cool, especially if you're in a space where you want to be unplugged but you can't necessarily turn off your phone. It is a way to
Hmm.
because I've done it for school drop off now where I'm like, I put it face down in the center console. And there's so many moments where I'm like, I want to grab my phone. Oh, I want to look something up, and I'm like, nope, be present, be right here, and then pick up the phone. And you will not have missed anything. You will have gained something.
And that's what we need to end on. That right there. When you think in your head that you have been missing out by being
Yeah.
unplugged, no, time and time again, you were not. And
Mm.
whatever was there will be there when you log back in. And if
Yep.
it's gone, it's just gone. Like, I remember in the early days of the Unplugged Hour Challenge, like I would sit back and go like, oh man, well, what about when people respond to my stories and then they disappear and then I don't know what they shared or what they commented on? Like, I have to check my. That's how these apps get you. That is how they put you in a literal chokehold. It is by
Yeah.
design. It is by
Yep.
design. And so, just like Hannah said at the end of the book, take your time, reclaim your time. Like,
Yeah.
it's okay. If they really need you, they can email you. If they really know you, they can call you. So it's
Yeah.
just like you're not going to miss out and it's going to be okay. And so I think that is probably the biggest thing that I can dispel with this live stream is to simply tell you, for every moment that you think you're missing, being present with the people in front of
Mm.
you is so much better for your soul. And
Yeah.
that's what we need to be focused on. So again, shameless plug, pre-order a copy of The Unplugged Hours, written by Hannah Brencher. I'm so glad you could be here today. For friends who watch this on LinkedIn, you can share the LinkedIn Live. You can also share the YouTube Live. But I would just encourage you, continue to stay connected with Hannah regardless, because her books really do speak to what's happening in the moment. I mean, she's done it 4 times, so I feel like she knows what she's doing. So thank you again for being here, for letting me brag on you and put the spotlight on you. But as we like to say on the channel, until next time, ta-ta for now.